5 years ago, my family held Thanksgiving dinner without me. Not because I was sick, not because I lived too far away, not because we had fought. They simply decided it would be more peaceful if I wasn't there. And the worst part? They expected me to understand. They expected me to agree that I was the problem. If you've ever been excluded by the very people who are supposed to love you unconditionally, then stay with me. Because what happened next changed my life forever. And if you believe in protecting your peace and building a life where you are fully chosen, make sure you subscribe right now, because this story is about exactly that. The phone call came 4 days before Thanksgiving. My mother's voice sounded rehearsed, like she had practiced the sentences in front of a mirror. She told me Victoria was hosting this year. She said emotions were fragile. She said it might be better if I skipped it, just this once. Just this once. As if that phrase hadn't followed me my entire life. Victoria had always been the golden child. Perfect grades, perfect engagement, perfect timing. I was the unpredictable one, the emotional one, the one who didn't smile on command, the one who asked why. When I was 10, I remember interrupting a dinner conversation because something didn't feel fair. My father pulled me aside afterward and said, "You don't always have to make everything harder." That sentence stayed with me longer than he probably realized. By 27, I had mastered the art of shrinking, speaking softer, laughing less loudly, swallowing discomfort, and still, somehow, I was too much. After the call ended, I sat on the edge of my bed staring at the wall. I wasn't shocked. I was tired. Tired of trying to earn permanent membership in a family I was born into. I told my mother I understood. I even wished them a happy holiday. Then I made a reservation for one at a small restaurant in Boston. If I was going to be alone, at least I wouldn't be staring at silence in my apartment. The restaurant smelled like rosemary and butter. Families filled every table. Laughter bounced off the walls. I kept telling myself I was fine. I ordered wine. I ordered dessert. I pretended I preferred it this way. Then my phone buzzed. Instagram. I should have ignored it. But I didn't. There they were. My parents. My brother. Victoria glowing at the center of the table. The caption read, "So grateful for everyone at our table this year." Everyone. There wasn't an empty chair. That image did something irreversible inside me. Not explosive, not dramatic, just a quiet internal click, like a door locking from the inside. I finished my meal. I walked home in the cold Boston air, and somewhere between that restaurant and my apartment, I made a decision. I would never beg for a seat again. 2 months later, I met Marcus. It wasn't cinematic. He grabbed my coffee by mistake because we had the exact same complicated order. He apologized. I laughed. We ended up sharing a table because there were no others free. He asked thoughtful questions, not interrogations, not surface-level curiosity. Real questions. And when he asked about my family, I paused. I told him the truth in pieces. He didn't rush to comfort me. He didn't minimize it. He didn't say, "But they're your family." He simply listened. That was new. 3 months later, he invited me to meet his parents. I expected politeness. What I didn't expect was warmth. Richard Morrison opened the door with a smile that reached his eyes. Eleanor Morrison hugged me like she meant it. There was no scanning glance, no silent evaluation, no comparison to someone else. They asked about my work. They remembered details later. They laughed at my jokes. They didn't flinch when I expressed strong opinions. It felt unfamiliar, almost suspicious. The following Thanksgiving, Marcus invited me again. I almost said no. Old habits, old wounds. But I went. When we arrived, there was an empty chair beside Eleanor. She smiled and said, "We saved you a seat." I had to step away for a moment because my chest tightened so suddenly I couldn't breathe. They didn't know what that sentence meant. They didn't know that 1 year earlier, I had stared at a photo proving I was replaceable. Over the next year, I observed something radical. Disagreements that didn't become character attacks, boundaries that weren't punishments, apologies that didn't include excuses. When Marcus proposed in their backyard under soft string lights, he said something I will never forget. "I want to build a life where you never question whether you belong." I said yes before he finished speaking. Inviting my biological family to the wedding felt like reopening a scar. My mother cried. My father said he was proud. Victoria asked if there would be drama. There wasn't. The wedding was simple, bright, peaceful. During the reception, my father pulled me aside and said maybe things hadn't always been perfect. It wasn't an apology, but it was the closest I had ever received. Victoria remained distant. For the first time, her distance didn't shrink me. 6 months later, Richard and Eleanor asked if we would consider a formal, symbolic adoption, not because it was necessary, but because they never wanted me to feel halfway included. I broke down in tears. We signed papers in their living room, took photos, shared cake. My biological family found out online. My mother called, hurt and confused. I asked her where that urgency had been when I needed it. Silence again. We didn't scream. We didn't explode. We simply reached the end of something that had been thinning for decades. I blocked numbers that week, not out of anger, out of peace. When I found out I was pregnant, I stood frozen in the bathroom holding the test. Marcus lifted me off the floor in a spinning hug. Eleanor cried again. Richard started researching cribs like it was a national emergency. For the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting to be chosen. I was building something new. The baby shower filled their backyard with laughter and white lights. I caught my reflection in the window. Round belly, steady smile, surrounded by people who were there because they wanted to be. No one was tolerating me. No one was managing me. No one was asking me to be smaller. They were choosing me. When our daughter was born that October, the nurse asked who should be listed as grandparents. I didn't hesitate. Richard and Eleanor Morrison. Not to make a statement, not to hurt anyone, simply because it was true. Months later, an envelope arrived with no return address. Inside was the old Thanksgiving photo. Someone had circled the empty space near my mother and written, "There was always room." I stared at it for a long time. Then I threw it away. Because there hadn't been room. If there had been room, I wouldn't have been asked to leave. Now, every Thanksgiving, our house is loud and warm, children running, football arguments, terrible turkey jokes, Eleanor squeezing my hand, Marcus kissing my forehead in passing, and my daughter growing up seeing what real love looks like. People ask if I would reconcile. Maybe, if reconciliation meant accountability, if it meant change, if it meant love without conditions. But I no longer need that to feel whole. The greatest revenge isn't humiliation. It isn't exposure. It isn't proving someone wrong. The greatest revenge is building a life so full that their absence becomes irrelevant. They didn't lose me at the wedding. They lost me the moment they decided I was optional. And I found myself the moment I decided I wasn't. If you feel invisible at your own table, if you've been told you're too sensitive for wanting respect, if you've been asked to shrink to make others comfortable, stand up, walk away, build your own table, make it warm, make it loud, make it safe.